Emma had always been the pillar of her marriage. For over a decade, she stood by Jason's side, supporting his career, his ambitions, and his every move. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple, one of those pairs that everyone in the town looked up to. Friends would often comment on how lucky Jason was to have someone as devoted as Emma, and she would smile, trying to ignore the tiny voice inside that whispered, "What about you?" She had given everything to their relationship. When Jason decided to start his own business, Emma was the one who helped set it up. She handled the logistics, the finances, the endless paperwork, and even some of the marketing. Yet as the business began to grow, Emma found herself being gradually pushed out. First, it was small decisions that Jason no longer consulted her about. Then, it was the larger, more significant aspects of the business until, eventually, she was left with nothing but the title of supportive wife. Emma had once been vibrant and full of life, but over the years, she felt herself becoming more of a shadow. She had put aside her own dreams, her hobbies, and her personal growth for Jason's sake. He never asked her to, of course. Jason wasn't that obvious. But in subtle, unspoken ways, it became clear that his success and happiness were the priorities. Emma felt it each time she suggested an idea or made a comment, only to be brushed aside or met with an uninterested nod. There were late-night meetings, work trips that stretched into weekends, and secretive phone calls that Jason always excused as business. Emma didn't want to believe the worst, so she chalked it up to stress and the pressures of running a growing business. After all, they had been together for so long. Why would he stray? She tried to silence her doubts, but the unease lingered in the back of her mind. Jason had a way of making her feel small when she brought up her concerns. Whenever Emma hinted at the distance she felt growing between them, Jason would expertly turn the conversation on her. "You're overthinking again," he would say with a sigh, his voice dripping with that tone of patient condescension. "You've always been insecure about things like this. I'm working hard for us. Why can't you see that?" And Emma would believe him. For years, she let his words seep into her mind, convincing herself that she was the problem, that she was being unreasonable, that her fears were a product of her own imagination. He had always been so convincing, so good at twisting the narrative to make it seem like her concerns were unfounded. But cracks were beginning to show in Jason's facade. There were moments when his excuses didn't quite add up, when his charm felt a little too rehearsed, a little too forced. Emma started noticing the small details, the way he would rush to answer his phone when she entered the room, or how he avoided eye contact when certain topics came up. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. But every time she tried to confront him, Jason managed to turn the tables. His words were always so smooth, so carefully calculated to make her question herself. "You're just stressed," he would tell her, or, "We've been together for so long, you should trust me by now." Trust. That word began to feel like a weight around her neck. She had trusted Jason completely for so many years, even when she felt him slipping away. She had trusted him when she sacrificed her own career for his, when she let go of her own desires to support his dreams. But that trust was starting to crack, just like the foundation of their marriage. Then one day, everything changed. Emma wasn't snooping, but she couldn't ignore the gut feeling that had been gnawing at her for months. Jason's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was upstairs, and Emma, almost without thinking, glanced at the screen. What she saw made her stomach drop. It was a message from someone she didn't know, someone she had never even heard of, and it was intimate, far too intimate for someone who was just a colleague. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the conversation, her heart pounding in her chest. The flirtatious messages, the pictures, the dates, everything was there, laid out in front of her like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. For a moment, Emma felt paralyzed. The reality of Jason's betrayal hit her like a tidal wave, threatening to pull her under. All the years she had spent standing by his side, all the sacrifices she had made, all the love and trust she had given him, it all seemed to evaporate in an instant. But as the shock began to wear off, something else took its place. It wasn't just anger or heartbreak, though those emotions were there too. It was clarity. For the first time in years, Emma saw things for what they really were. The marriage she had fought so hard to maintain wasn't the partnership she had convinced herself it was. Jason hadn't just betrayed her with another woman, he had been betraying her for years in countless, smaller ways, eroding her sense of self with every dismissive comment, every manipulative twist of the truth. Emma didn't confront Jason that night. She didn't rage or scream or cry. Instead, she sat with the truth, letting it settle around her like armor. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel powerless. Jason had taken so much from her, but this was different. This was her turning point. Emma sat with the truth for days, silently observing Jason's every move, knowing what he had done, but saying nothing. She had realized that confrontation, in that moment, would only give Jason the chance to weave another one of his lies, to turn the situation around and make her feel small again. Instead, she decided she needed to be strategic. She needed time to think, time to plan, and most importantly, time to heal. The betrayal had shaken her to her core, but it had also awakened something in her. There was a clarity in the pain, a voice that whispered, "You've lost yourself. It's time to find the woman you were before him." For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel overwhelmed by her situation. Instead, she felt a quiet resolve. She wasn't just going to survive this, she was going to come out stronger, no longer under Jason's control. The first step in her plan wasn't revenge, though it would come later. The first step was reclaiming herself. Jason had taken so much from her, but what she could regain was her sense of identity, her independence. Emma booked her first therapy session that same week. She needed someone to help her make sense of the years of emotional abuse and manipulation she had endured. She needed to untangle herself from the web Jason had spun around her. In therapy, Emma began to understand how deep Jason's manipulation had gone. His gaslighting wasn't just about the affair, it had permeated every aspect of their relationship. He had convinced her that her dreams weren't worth pursuing, that her opinions didn't matter, that her life should revolve around him and his success. The realization was painful, but it also set her free. She wasn't crazy, she wasn't overreacting, and she wasn't insecure. Jason had made her feel that way on purpose, to keep her dependent on him. With each therapy session, Emma felt lighter. She began to see the possibilities for her life beyond Jason. She could rebuild herself, not as someone's wife, but as Emma, a woman with her own goals, her own desires, her own future. Slowly, she began reconnecting with parts of herself she had forgotten. She started painting again, filling canvases with color and emotion, using her art as a way to process everything she had been through. It wasn't just a hobby anymore, it was a lifeline. As Emma grew stronger, she also grew more distant from Jason, though he didn't seem to notice. He was still wrapped up in his own world, assuming Emma was none the wiser about his affair. She didn't change her routine too drastically, not yet. She kept things steady on the surface, giving herself time to quietly regain her strength and make preparations for what was to come. Every interaction with Jason felt surreal. He was still the same man, but now Emma saw him clearly, for what he truly was. It was as though a fog had lifted, and she could finally see through his charming facade to the selfish, deceitful man underneath. Emma reconnected with old friends, the ones Jason had slowly isolated her from over the years. At first, the conversations were awkward. How do you explain that you've been living in a gilded cage for over a decade? But the more she talked, the more she realized that her friends had seen through Jason long before she had. They welcomed her back with open arms, offering support, encouragement, and most importantly, reminding her of who she was before her marriage had swallowed her whole. Her transformation wasn't immediate, but it was steady. Each day, Emma took back a little more of herself. She stopped tiptoeing around Jason's moods, stopped bending to his every whim, and started putting her own needs first. Jason, oblivious to the changes happening right under his nose, continued his double life, unaware that Emma was now carefully crafting an exit from their marriage, an exit that would leave him exposed and vulnerable. While Jason was busy with his affair, Emma quietly began looking into their financials. Over the years, she had stepped back from their business, at Jason's insistence, but she had never been completely cut off. She knew where the money was, how it moved, and more importantly, how to take control of it. Jason had always assumed she was too naive or too distracted to understand the complexities of their finances. He underestimated her, just as he always had. That was his mistake. Emma's plan was taking shape. She wouldn't confront Jason in a heated moment. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken or angry. No, she would leave him on her own terms, when she was ready, and when the time was right. But before she could do that, she needed to make sure she was protected. She consulted a lawyer in secret, laying out her case and preparing for the divorce. The lawyer was impressed by how methodical she had been, gathering evidence, planning every step carefully. Emma wasn't just going to walk away, she was going to reclaim everything Jason had taken from her, and more. Through it all, Emma never lost sight of her goal, to rebuild herself and her life, not as a reaction to Jason's betrayal, but as an act of self-love and empowerment. She wasn't driven by hatred or revenge, though both simmered beneath the surface. She was driven by the need to reclaim her life, to heal, and to become the person she was always meant to be. Each passing day brought her closer to the moment she would confront Jason, not with words, but with action. She would show him that the woman he had taken for granted, the woman he had betrayed, was far stronger than he could ever have imagined. And when that day came, it would be Jason who would be left picking up the pieces, not her. Emma had grown stronger, more resolute, and her plan was now fully formed. She wasn't the same woman she had been when she first discovered Jason's affair. She had transformed from a heartbroken wife into someone who had reclaimed control of her life. The more she worked on her exit strategy, the more her confidence grew. She knew exactly what she had to do and how to do it. The key was patience and precision. Jason's arrogance would be his downfall, and Emma would ensure that when the moment came, he wouldn't see it coming. One of the critical elements of Emma's plan was the business she had helped Jason build. Early on in their marriage, they had worked together to get it off the ground. But as the business expanded, Jason gradually edged her out, making her feel like an outsider in something she had helped create. He had convinced her that she wasn't cut out for the business world, but Emma had always been sharper than he gave her credit for. Now, she was ready to use her knowledge of the business to her advantage. Emma had quietly started buying shares in the company, using the money she had discreetly saved over the years. Jason, preoccupied with his own ambitions and personal distractions, never noticed. She also leveraged her deep understanding of the business's financials, ensuring that her stake in the company grew without drawing attention. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming what was hers. She had sacrificed so much of herself for Jason's dreams, and now, it was time to take something back. As Emma solidified her control behind the scenes, she continued to gather evidence of Jason's affair and his other indiscretions. She wasn't just looking for proof of his betrayal, she wanted leverage. Emma understood that to walk away with her dignity, her financial security, and the upper hand, she needed to be smart. She gathered emails, financial records, and other details that Jason never would have imagined she could access. Every piece of information became a building block in her plan. Jason's affair wasn't just a moral failure, it was also a professional liability. He had been using company resources to fund his affair, a fact Emma discovered during her quiet investigation. Expensive dinners, hotel stays, gifts, all charged to the business under thinly veiled pretenses. Emma made sure to document every detail, knowing that when the time came, this evidence would give her the final advantage she needed to secure her future. All the while, Jason remained blissfully unaware. His life, as far as he could tell, was perfect. He believed he had everything under control, a successful business, a comfortable marriage where Emma remained supportive and quiet, and a secret relationship that provided him with the excitement he craved. He didn't see the cracks forming, didn't notice the subtle shifts in Emma's demeanor. To him, she was still the same loyal wife who had always put him first. But Emma had changed. She was no longer playing the role of the submissive, devoted partner. She was playing the long game, And Jason had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Emma had timed everything perfectly. She waited for the right moment, one where her financial position was secure, her evidence was ironclad, and Jason was at his most vulnerable. Then, the perfect opportunity arrived. Jason had planned a lavish business event, something that would elevate his public image and solidify his standing in the community. It was the kind of event where everything had to go perfectly, and Jason had spent months preparing for it. What he didn't know was that Emma had also been preparing, but for a very different kind of reveal. On the day of the event, Emma put her plan into motion. While Jason was preoccupied with the final details, Emma quietly filed for divorce. But it wasn't just a simple filing. She had ensured that her legal team had all the evidence they needed to expose Jason's affair, his financial misconduct, and his betrayal. Her lawyer sent the documents not only to Jason but to key business partners and associates, ensuring that the fallout would be both personal and professional. As the papers were served, the ripple effects began. Jason, caught completely off guard, was forced to confront the reality of his actions. The affair, once a secret he had kept hidden, was now public knowledge. His misuse of company funds was laid bare, and the business partners he had worked so hard to impress were now questioning his integrity. The facade he had maintained for so long was shattered, and there was no way for him to put the pieces back together. Emma didn't attend the event. She didn't need to. By the time the dust settled, her work was done. Jason's downfall wasn't just about the affair, it was about the years of manipulation, lies, and emotional abuse he had inflicted upon her. She had given him every chance to be honest, to be a better man, but he had chosen deceit. Now, he would face the consequences. For Emma, this wasn't about vengeance in the traditional sense. She hadn't sought to destroy Jason out of pure spite. Instead, she had reclaimed her life, her autonomy, and her power. In taking control of the business, Emma ensured that she wouldn't just survive the divorce, she would thrive. She had taken back what was rightfully hers, and Jason was left with nothing but the consequences of his own actions. As the news of Jason's affair and financial misconduct spread, his reputation crumbled. Business partners pulled out of deals, clients reconsidered their contracts, and Jason found himself isolated, both personally and professionally. The woman he had underestimated for so long had turned the tables on him in a way he never saw coming. His charm, his manipulation, his lies, they had all failed him in the end. Emma, meanwhile, emerged from the wreckage stronger than ever. She hadn't just walked away from the marriage, she had taken her power back, ensuring that her future would be secure, independent, and free from Jason's control. The business that Jason had once pushed her out of was now hers, and she knew exactly how to make it thrive. The feeling of empowerment wasn't just about the business or the financial security. It was about knowing that she had overcome years of manipulation and betrayal, and had come out the other side as a stronger, more resilient woman. Jason's downfall wasn't her victory, her own growth, healing, and reclamation of self was the true triumph. With Jason's world in ruins, Emma felt an immense sense of relief wash over her. She hadn't just ended a marriage, she had freed herself from years of emotional imprisonment. It was strange to think about it now, how long she had lived under Jason's thumb, but those days felt like a lifetime ago. What she felt now was not just freedom, but empowerment. Her life was finally hers again, and that realization came with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Emma's first move was to completely disentangle herself from the chaos of Jason's collapse. While he dealt with the public fallout of his affair and financial misdeeds, she focused on moving forward. She packed up her belongings and moved into a new apartment, a space that was entirely her own. No longer bound to the house that held so many memories of their marriage, Emma felt as if she could finally breathe again. It wasn't just about leaving Jason behind, it was about creating a space where she could rediscover herself. With her newfound independence, Emma threw herself into her work. The business she had quietly taken control of during the divorce was now fully under her management. She restructured it, brought in fresh talent, and made changes that reflected her own vision. The success of the business was important, but more than that, it was a symbol of her own growth. This was something she had built from the ground up, something that she had fought to reclaim. Every decision she made, every step she took to expand the business, was a reminder that she was more than capable of standing on her own. But Emma didn't stop there. Her journey of healing wasn't just about professional success, it was about rebuilding herself from the inside out. She continued her therapy, working through the complex emotions that still lingered from her years with Jason. The betrayal and manipulation had left deep wounds, but with time, those wounds began to heal. Each therapy session helped her untangle the lingering threads of guilt, anger, and sadness that had held her back for so long. Emma also reconnected with the parts of her life that had been neglected during her marriage. She immersed herself in painting, something that had once brought her so much joy. Now, it became more than just a hobby, it became a form of self-expression and healing. Her art studio became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour her emotions onto the canvas, creating something beautiful out of the pain she had endured. The more she painted, the more she felt her confidence and self-worth return. Surrounded by her art, Emma felt more grounded in her own identity than she had in years. She was no longer just Jason's wife, no longer the woman who had sacrificed everything for someone who never appreciated her. She was Emma, an artist, a business owner, a woman who had taken control of her own destiny. The transformation was profound, and for the first time, she felt truly at peace with herself. As Emma settled into her new life, she also began to rebuild her social connections. The friends she had distanced herself from during her marriage welcomed her back without hesitation. It wasn't just about rekindling old friendships. It was about surrounding herself with people who saw her for who she really was, not for the role she had played in her marriage. These friendships became a source of strength and support, reminding Emma that she was never truly alone, even during her darkest moments. One of the most unexpected parts of Emma's journey was the realization that she wasn't just moving on from Jason, she was moving on from the version of herself that had existed in that marriage. She no longer felt the need to define herself by her relationship or by the expectations that had been placed on her. She had found something far more valuable, her own voice. That voice had been silenced for too long, but now it was clear, strong, and unwavering. As the months passed, Jason's life continued to unravel. His business collapsed, his reputation was tarnished, and the relationships he had built on lies and deceit crumbled. Emma heard bits and pieces about his downfall through mutual acquaintances, but she didn't dwell on it. She no longer needed to keep track of his failures, she had moved beyond that. Karma had played its part, and Jason was now reaping the consequences of his actions. For Emma, the real victory wasn't in watching Jason's downfall. It was in realizing that she no longer cared. She had spent so many years worrying about his approval, about his happiness, about making their marriage work. But now, none of that mattered. What mattered was her own happiness, her own growth, and the life she was building for herself. She had walked away from the pain and manipulation, and in doing so, she had found something far more valuable, herself. Emma's life became a reflection of the woman she had always been, but had forgotten during her years with Jason. She traveled, explored new hobbies, and took risks she would have never considered before. Every day felt like a new opportunity to discover more about herself and the world around her. She was no longer constrained by the limitations of her past, and that freedom was intoxicating. In the end, Emma didn't need revenge to feel whole again. The act of reclaiming her life, of rebuilding herself from the ground up, was enough. Jason's downfall was merely a byproduct of his own choices, and Emma had no desire to revel in his suffering. She had outgrown the need for revenge or validation. She had found her peace, and that was the most powerful thing of all. As she stood in her art studio, surrounded by her paintings, Emma realized that her journey wasn't about what she had lost, it was about what she had gained. She had learned to trust herself, to value her own worth, and to never settle for anything less than she deserved. The years of pain and betrayal had taught her more than she ever imagined, and now, she was stronger, wiser, and more complete than she had ever been before.